We should be staying here representing the best interests of our constituents, helping to put this country back to work. So thank you again, Mr. Hoyer, for yielding and for bringing this important issue to everyone's attention.
I thank the gentlelady for her comments. Now I want to recognize a distinguished gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Carnahan, who's been such a leader on so many of these issues. Mr. Carnahan.
Thank you. I want to thank the gentleman from Maryland for his leadership on this issue as this Congress shuts down. It was Harry Truman from Missouri who coined the term the Do-Nothing Congress in 1948. But that Congress was 10 times more productive than this Republican Congress of 2012. To call this Congress a Do-Nothing Congress is an insult to the Do-Nothing Congress of 1948. So we're leaving today, earliest this Congress has ever left a campaign in an election year in 52 years. Look at how disconnected this Congress has been from the urgent needs of the American people. 30% of the bills passed were for the purpose of attaching someone's name to a building. We voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act 33 times. The Republicans passed 30 jobs message bills that didn't do a thing to create jobs. They voted so often to restrict women's freedom and access to health care that one female Republican lawmaker said, quote, "Are you kidding me? How many times are we going to vote for this?" unquote. And we have voted on the Romney-Ryan plan to end Medicare, end the Medicare guarantee and the increased cost to seniors by $6,400. It's no wonder this Republican Congress has the lowest approval rating ever. There are urgent priorities on the table that many have talked about here today: the middle-class tax cuts, the Farm Bill, the Violence Against Women Act, and responsible deficit reduction in President Obama's jobs bill. This Republican-built wall of obstruction is wreaking havoc on this country. It's leaving a trail of dysfunction, and now Republicans are running for the exit door. To cut their own political losses, they're shutting down this people's house without getting the work done. This Congress should be here. Our Democratic leaders have made it clear we're ready to do that work. People will be the judge. And again, I yield back and thank the gentleman from Maryland for his leadership on this order.
I thank the gentleman for his comments. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include therein extraneous materials on the topic of this special order. And I now yield to my friend.
Without objection, so ordered.
I yield to my friend from New Jersey, Mr. Holt, who has been such an effective member of this House.
As we've heard the gentleman from Maryland say many times, representative is not just a title. It's our job description. We need to hear from our constituents. And our constituents have told us over and over again this year what they want. They want middle-class tax relief. They want a farm bill. They want the Postal Service fixed so it can pay its bills. They want passage of the Violence Against Women Act. It's a long list of things that they feel we can do to help Americans. We've had an opportunity to hear from people because the leadership sent us home a month and a half ago where we could hold town meetings while they allowed us to do nothing here. And we heard from our constituents very clearly, not just from a small segment, not just from a few special interests, not just from a few percent for whom everything seems just fine, thank you, but we heard from all sorts of Americans who say, help, please get to work. You've heard this is the least productive Congress in a generation, in a long generation. And that's by design. The majority sets the schedule, They scheduled very few days in session, very few committee hearings, very few markups. So even the do-nothing Congress, as my friend from Missouri said, even the Congress that Harry Truman called the do-nothing Congress was much more productive than this one. So why did the majority close up shop and head home until after the election? Well, the answer, I think, is pretty clear. They want to campaign, and they've decided that with their dismal record, they need a little more time to campaign. A little time to explain why they cast 302 votes to limit protections for clean air and clean water and good land. They need a little more time to explain why the Farm Bill, to help the areas that have been hit by drought, to help the farmers that need crop insurance, hasn't been passed. To be sure, it's going to be hard to campaign on the record that they've compiled, and maybe they need a little extra time. We don't need extra time to hear from our constituents about their needs and what they want us to do. I stand with my friend Mr. Hoyer and all of us on this side of the aisle to return to Washington any day, any night, to do the work that the American people hired us to do, to be their representatives. And I thank my friend
the gentleman for his very compelling comments. And I know that, Mr. Speaker, you've heard us speak, and the members have heard us speak, and one might say, well, these are Democrats speaking about the non-productivity and non-attention to the people's business of this Congress. But some years ago, just a few years ago, 4 years ago, the Republican Party, our friends on that side of the aisle, nominated John McCain to be their president. What does John McCain say of this Congress? The worst since 1947, statistically, the worst ever as far as I'm concerned. Senator John McCain told reporters Wednesday when asked to assess this Congress. That was September 19th, 2012, just a few days ago. Bipartisan observation. This walk-away Congress is the least effective in which I've served, and I've been here for 31 years, and I want to yield to my friend who came to Congress the same year I did, who unfortunately is leaving, one of the great leaders of this Congress and responsible for putting the referee back on the field so that we will not have another financial meltdown that plunged this country almost into depression, the distinguished member from Massachusetts, Barney Frank.
I thank the Democratic whip, and I thank him for the leadership he provided during his years as majority leader when we were able to do some things. You know, we're talking about what this Congress didn't do. I suppose in some ways we ought to be happy because some of what they said they wanted to do would have been totally destructive. This is the party that let the financial community run riot for years when they had both the White House and both houses of Congress, did no regulation so that we got the worst recession in 80 years, a near depression, because of their irresponsibility. And they were threatening to undo it. Unfortunately, they were able to accomplish one thing. One of the things we did was to give the federal regulatory agencies the power to regulate derivatives, a serious, obscure, powerful instrument that was a major cause of our crisis. While they were not able to repeal the rules, they were able to reduce the funding of the agencies that have to deal with this complex matter to a level where they have not been very effective. So that's one of the things they were able to do. Good job. Undo by financial stealth what we tried to get done. But I want to come to their defense to some extent, Mr. Whip, because there may be some implication that they're not willing to work hard. No, let's be very clear. The reason we have such a dismal record here is not because they are lazy, our Republican colleagues. It's more because of a word that rhymes with lazy, which the House rules will prohibit me from using. The problem is this. In 2010, a significant number of Republicans were elected who do not understand the importance of governance in a free enterprise society in which there has to be a vigorous private sector creating goods and services and a public sector that works with it. That's why we have no postal bill, although the Senate passed one. why we have no agricultural bill, why they couldn't pass a highway bill and had to be dependent on the Democratic Senate to pass one so they could catch on to it. They simply do not understand the importance of our coming together and doing things in this complex economic society that cannot be done by the private sector. It is an extremism. It's not laziness, it is extremism that grips the Republican Party so they are not able to discharge the normal functions of government. And by the way, there's one particular inaction that I want to stress. It has to do with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. When my Republican friends are out of power, they know exactly what to do about housing. When they're in power, they forget. It's a peculiar form of amnesia. From 1995 till 2006, they controlled the Congress and did nothing about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We came to office in 2007 at the request of Henry Paulson, George Bush, the Secretary of the Treasury. We took action to put them in a conservatorship and stop them from losing money. The next step was to go forward with replacing them. We said that we would do that. We did financial reform first. The Republicans said in 2009 and 10, you must do reform of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And we thought financial reform came first because we'd already stopped the bleeding. And then they came to power in 2011, and they've done nothing. And the reason they've done nothing about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and the reason they've done nothing about the post office and agriculture, and couldn't do anything about the highways is very simple. They are a party torn between extremists and people who are afraid of extremists, people who will not take them on, a speaker who will not bring an agriculture bill to the floor that might very well pass because he's intimidated by his own Tea Party extremist wing which rules him. They could not come forward with housing legislation because what a majority knows should be done to put in some kind of federal-private cooperation without the mistakes we've made in the past, they couldn't get the votes for because their extremists had a veto over it. Last point, Mr. Whip, I want to talk a little bit about bipartisanship. In 2007, things began to buckle in our financial system, and I, as the chairman of the committee, worked closely with Mr. Paulson to deal with it. In 2008, the Bush administration came to us, and you know what they wanted? You remember, a stimulus. That terrible word, stimulus. George Bush, that radical, and Ben Bernanke, his appointee to chairman of the Fed, and Hank Paulson, his Secretary of the Treasury, said, let's do a stimulus. This Democratic leadership worked with them. Then Speaker Pelosi negotiated with them. We did a bipartisan stimulus. Then later on, when the economy began to collapse because of financial dissolution, Hank Paulson came to us and asked for cooperation, and we gave him cooperation. From 2007 through 2008, we had a very bipartisan approach to the economic crisis. And then one thing happened. Barack Obama became president, and bipartisanship disappeared because extremism took over the Republican Party. First when they were in a minority, and now they were in the majority. And that's why nothing has happened. I thank the whip.
I thank the gentleman for his very cogent comments, and I would remind him that the leader talked about that. He's talked about it. Mr. Speaker, I think you will recall George Bush, Republican President of the United States, Hank Paulson, Republican Secretary of the Treasury, and Ben Bernanke, who I think is neither a Republican or Democrat, but appointed by the Republican
administration. He was a registered Republican, but was 3 times appointed by George Bush to high economic positions.
Came to us and said, President Bush, the country is in trouble, at risk of going into depression. We need you to act. And who acted? The Democrats, in a bipartisan response to President Bush. Who walked away? 2/3 of the Republican Party, the President's party. 2/3 of them walked away. And as a result, we failed the first time. We came back and added another 30 Democrats, 172, and the Republicans couldn't even get to 100 to support their own president to keep this country out of depression. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 years ago, as the previous election approached, Republicans unveiled a long list of pledges. Their pledge to America reads, and I quote, "A plan to create jobs, end economic uncertainty, and make America more competitive must be the first urgent domestic priority of our government. So first we offer a plan to get people working again." That's what they said. We are still waiting for that plan, and we have walked away. 21 months later, Republicans have not offered a comprehensive plan to create jobs and boost competitiveness, nor have they allowed Democrats to bring major items of our Make It in America, expand manufacturing, create jobs, give good-paying jobs with good security to Americans that will then redound to the benefit of all agencies and job creators and small businesses that service those manufacturers. When President Obama proposed his plan, the American Jobs Act, which economists say would have expanded by 1 million or 1.5 million jobs, Republicans blocked it outright. Not brought to the floor, not given the vote. Instead of making jobs their priority, it seems to have been last on their to-do list, at a time when it remains the first concern for millions and millions of Americans and for our side of the aisle. Mr. Speaker, let me read another excerpt from the Republican pledge. With common sense, exceptions for seniors, veterans, and our troops, we will roll back government spending, putting us on a path to balance the budget and pay down the debt. However, over the last 21 months, Republicans have torpedoed every serious attempt to reach agreement on deficit reduction. Why? No revenues from the very wealthy in America. Not because we don't like the very wealthy, not because we want to penalize the very wealthy, but because we need to keep our country on a financially secure path. And those of us on this floor can contribute a little more to that effort. Pushed to the extreme by their Tea Party wing, House Republicans early on embraced an our way or no way that made compromise impossible, refusing to accept any solution that included revenues or that ended unnecessary tax breaks for the wealthiest in our country. That's why the middle-class tax cut passed overwhelmingly in the United States, well, passed by a majority in the United States Senate, languishes here unconsidered, which would keep 98% of America from any concern about having their taxes increased on January 1st. Why? To protect the 2%. How sad. In pursuit of their extreme budget agenda, they pushed our country to the brink of default, leading for the first time ever in the history of our nation, the most creditworthy nation on earth being downgraded by the Standard & Poor's rating agency. To avert that default, Republicans insisted on creating the sequester that so many of them now lament. It was their creation, and in fact, in their cap, cut, and balance bill, what is the default position that they take? Sequester. Meanwhile, led by Chairman Paul Ryan, Republicans passed two budgets that would end Medicare as we know it, end the guarantee, end the security that it gives to people who are seniors and going to be seniors, gut social programs that keep millions out of poverty, and doesn't balance over the next 30 years. I want to, when I talk about this, Susan Collins, Republican member of the United States Senate. I showed you John McCain, Mr. Speaker. She says it is very frustrating to have worked on legislation that really matters to our country, like the cybersecurity bill and legislation to save the Postal Service, and just have them gather dust. In other words, she worked in the Senate across the aisle with Democrats and sent that bill here, both those bills, and we have not acted. We have walked away. In their pledge, they say we offer a plan to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act with common sense solutions focused on lowering costs and protecting American jobs. Both of those objectives, Mr. Speaker, we have made our point. Walking away has been the practice of this Congress. Not getting the work done has been the practice of this Congress. How lamentable it is for the American people. But as President Obama said, they have a choice. May they make it well.
Gentlemen,
and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlemen, time has expired. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5th, 2011, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gohmert, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader. I thought I had more than that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oh, my head's spinning a bit after hearing my friends across the aisle. I heard our former speaker ask about whether we're better off now than we were 4 years ago, and actually ask how can people who perpetuated this economic disaster ask that question. And it was amazing because former Speaker Pelosi and I were on exactly the same wavelength. She was asking, are we better off now than you were 4 years ago? And I was thinking the same thing that she was. How could people who perpetuated this economic disaster ask that question? But she asked it anyway. Heard our friends talk about the economic disaster. Some of us remember back into the early point of the 21st century when there was an effort by first-term President Bush, George W. Bush, calling for reform of Fannie and Freddie. And I seem to recall my friend from Massachusetts who resisted such reform. In fact, there were people here on the Democratic side of the aisle that resisted such reform. They prevented such reform. There were members on the Republican side, not all of them, but there were members who were calling for reform of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. But it didn't happen. And in fact, our friends across the aisle were in control of the House and Senate for 4 years. In 2005 and 2006, as a freshman, I often heard our colleagues across the aisle asking how we could do such a terrible, terrible thing of spending $100 to $200 billion more than we had coming in. Little did we know, and they were right. They were right. We should not have been spending $160 billion more than we had coming in. The Democrats were right. And because Republicans did not stay true to what we had promised, our leadership just wouldn't dig in and stop it, even though we had a Republican president. You know, well, we got a Republican president, don't want to hurt his feelings. We spent $160 billion more than we had coming in. So the American public sounded like they weren't thrilled with what they heard from the Democrats, but they figured they'd give them a chance. So November 2006, Democrats, who had promised to end the deficit spending, took over, and the deficit spending, rather than coming under control, went out of sight. They passed the Dodd-Frank bill. It has historic overregulation of community banks. Now, why would a group who is so upset with Wall Street pass legislation that devastates community banks that are closest to the community, know the borrowers the best, that have been the real foundation of this country? Why would they strangle out community banks with this massive over-regulation that really doesn't hurt the massive big banks? Well, someone said years ago, follow the money. And if you look at the money that has been contributed to campaigns for many years, you find out that the Wall Street executives and their immediate family normally donate about 4 times more to Democrats than they do to Republicans. Now, the Wall Street executives have to endure being called fat cats by a Democratic president, but they know, perhaps it's a wink and a nod, I'll call you fat cats, but I'm going to destroy your competition. We'll get rid of the community banks. We'll strangle them with overregulation. They can't make loans. We'll threaten them through the FDIC and the regulators to prevent them from making loans that they know are to good, reliable people that have never missed a payment. We'll threaten them not to do that, and we'll choke them out, and the only people to be left are the big investment banks on Wall Street that got us into the big mess in the first place. So if you follow the money and you follow the contributions, you find out, gee, Democrats talk about Wall Street as if they're Republicans, but there are 4 times more Democrats on Wall Street as executives than there are Republicans. What a shock. Because they talk a good game. I thought for so long that Wall Street executives must be Republicans the way the Democrats talk. Not so. President Obama got 4 times more contributions from the executives and their immediate family than did a guy named John McCain. So, we look on further. What about jobs? How about when we have a disaster by British Petroleum, who has been allowed to operate in the Gulf Coast with 800 or so egregious safety violations, but that's okay, according to the Obama administration, that they didn't want to step in. And I read an account that at the very time Deepwater Horizon had blown out, and this administration, the Obama administration, should have been all over them. The executives of British Petroleum were negotiating with the Democrats to be the one big oil company that rolled out support in favor of cap and trade. I said I wouldn't use the term crap and trade anymore, so I'll avoid saying that. But they had a big oil company that was willing to come out and support cap and trade. So certainly this administration and the Democrats in the House and Senate wouldn't want to do anything too detrimental to British Petroleum because they're going to come out on our side. That meant that they ended up actually believing BP when they said, oh, we'll get it under control. Well, they didn't get it under control. So then there was this bipartisan group of experts peer reviewing what was going on in the Gulf Coast. And they came back with a report that made recommendations of what should be done. One of those recommendations was not to have a moratorium on drilling, not only of the deep water, but also the very shallow water. They didn't recommend it. And yet this administration goes through and changes the report the way it's printed and put out so that it makes it sound like these experts recommended a moratorium. They did not. But that's the way this administration wanted to manipulate what the American public believed so that the president could sign off on a moratorium. And we, other than those precious lives that were lost and those who were harmed out there on the Deepwater Horizon rig because this administration had allowed them to continue to operate, the biggest damage to the people in the Gulf area was from the president's moratorium. There were people who were making $75,000 in salary working on rigs, and that was minimum basically from what I was told by people that worked on rigs. And that income stopped, and those families had nothing because this president perverted a report into making people believe that it said we should cut off drilling in the Gulf Coast, and it devastated so many in the Gulf Coast region. If you want to look at what the president really thinks about big oil companies, it's very similar to what is said and done about Wall Street. They call the Wall Street executives all kinds of names, wink, wink, nod, nod. We're going to pass legislation that eliminates your competition, and then you'll be in charge, and then maybe you can make 8 times as many contributions to Democrats as you do to Republicans in both Wall Street and among big oil. How? What would that happen? Well, if you read the bill that President Obama put together, and it was the second American Jobs Act that was filed, because I filed the first one, because he ran around the country for weeks saying pass the American Jobs Act. There wasn't one filed. I figured if he's going to run around America saying pass the American Jobs Act, there ought to be one. So I put a two-page bill together that would eliminate the 35% tariff we put on every American-made good by any company in America. If we eliminate that 35% tariff, also called a corporate tax, you would see companies flocking into America. You would see people with jobs. They wouldn't be standing in line trying to get food stamps, standing in line trying to get more government help. They would have a job and all the pride that comes from that, of doing a good job and making your own money and making your own way. But we have a group in this Congress in both ends of they're in the majority down in the Senate, in the minority down here, and it's certainly not all of my Democratic friends, but they think the best way to help a country is just to give away more of other people's money. If you look at the President's proposal in his so-called American Jobs Act, he told people, I'm going to just really take after big oil. Well, I was one who actually read all 135 or 38 pages, whatever it was, and in that last part is where he got around to big oil, except it doesn't hurt big oil. It absolutely devastates and would eliminate all of the small independent oil companies operating in America. And those small independent oil companies happen to drill and operate nearly 95% of all the oil and gas wells in America. He takes away deductions of the normal cost of doing business that anybody in business is allowed to take as a deduction. Why not? It's the cost of doing business. It's not profit. That way you only tax the profit. And it eliminates deductions that actually do not help big oil companies. They can't take those deductions. Only the small companies can take that deduction. So the President's plan, when you really look at it, instead of looking at what he actually did, or look at what he, instead of looking at what he says, look at what he did. What he did was provide the elimination of independent oil and gas companies in America, and you don't have to have been to an Ivy League school. In fact, you're better off maybe in figuring this out if you didn't, because he had a Harvard economic advisor at the time, and of course Art Laffer, I think the world of him. I think he's maybe the best economic advisor any president's ever had, despite his Harvard education. But you don't have to have an Ivy League education to understand that if this president had been successful in eliminating every independent oil and gas company as his bill would have done, not only will you eliminate millions of jobs, including those who derive jobs from the independent oil and gas business as well as business itself, not only would you do that, you would eliminate most of the production in America. What does that do? That drives the price of oil and gasoline way up, dramatically up. Natural gas, oil, all of that goes dramatically up because the major oil companies in the world are not interested in coming in and operating smaller wells. They go for the big ones. That means there's no competition to the massive oil and gas companies in the world. I was shocked to find out in our Natural Resources Committee that if you look at all the oil and gas, the big oil companies in the world, and you see them listed just by how much they've got in reserves, the American companies like Exxon, they're way down the list. The biggest oil companies are those operating as single companies in OPEC nations. And what would this president do? He would do what he has done repeatedly. He would help foreign countries. He would help the bigger folks, the bigger oil companies. I'm sure it would have benefited the fat cats, as he calls them, on Wall Street. But it would have put out of business 95% of the oil and gas wells in America. That meant everybody's price went up. How sad is it that one of the few promises, I don't know, it may be the main promise that he kept, was to drive up the cost of energy in America? Well, boy, has he done that. Now, I love having quotes from people who talk about the Congress being the worst Congress that they can recall, when, especially Republicans, when the body at the other end of the hall has not fulfilled the obligation that they are required by law to do, and that's pass a budget, not in over 3 years. So how are we going to get anything done in Congress when we got a Senate down there controlled by Democrats who say we're not going to do our job, and we're going to leave over and over on recess, and we're never going to do our job, because if people saw what our budget really is, they get mad at us. So we don't want a budget. We just want to keep spending at these ridiculously high levels, and if we work through a budget, we might have to do like the House did when they worked through a budget. We might actually have to cut some things. And how incredibly disingenuous for anyone in America who would stand up and say, gee, we really want to bring down our spending, and yet everything they propose, except for the military, creates more spending. How disingenuous if anybody in America stands up and says these Republicans want to cut Medicare. They're going to destroy Medicare. Because if they've been awake during any of the actual bills that have been passed by the Democrats, and especially during that whole long ordeal when the Democrats had the House, they had the Senate, they had the White House, and America made clear we do not want Obamacare. They said we don't care. We want it. It's going to be more government control. It really was about the GRE, the government running everything, not just health care. But by passage of Obamacare without one single Republican vote, not a one, it was completely done with Democratic votes. $716 billion in cuts to Medicare. The Democrats voted that in. The Democratic president signed it in. It devastates Medicare more than anything that's ever been done to Medicare, and it was without one single Republican vote. So how in the world could somebody come in here or anywhere and blame Republicans for wanting to cut Medicare? Now, I blame my leadership. Anybody who's around can find it. We should never have agreed with the Democrats to that stupid super committee deficit ceiling bill. We should not have. And I was assured, no. They don't want $300 billion, $400, $500 billion in cuts in Medicare, which would be a sequester if we don't. So they will come together. We'll reach an agreement. And I pointed out, these are the same people that cut $716 billion out of Medicare in Obamacare. So, of course, I pointed out, if they don't have this super committee structure and refuse to let there be any agreement, then there is no one in the country that can be blamed for cutting Medicare except the Democrats. But if they get this bill passed on the deficit raising bill, and it requires a super committee to reach agreement, if they can get that through and get us to go along with it thinking that they're going to actually reach an agreement, then they can stonewall not reach an agreement no matter what we offer. And then they get a twofer. They get massive hundreds of billions in cuts to our national security at a time when our national security has not been in this kind of jeopardy since 9/11. Actually, on 9/11, it wasn't in the kind of jeopardy we are right now today. But under this administration, we have seen a win in Iraq turned into a loss. because of the just total abandonment of what we created in the way of a friend in Iraq. Maliki, now he's no friend of mine, he says I can't come back in the country, but if I put myself in Maliki's situation, the leader of Iraq, and I know Obama said, we're leaving, we're not leaving anybody, anything, we're leaving, and you're the leader in Iraq, you see America's pulling out, you see all this radical stuff going on across the border in Iran, well, you realize America's not going to be around to keep any stability. I'm going to have to start doing what Iran says. And so what did we do? We created a country. We had a victory. Everybody said, even though President Obama as a senator was against the surge, it worked, we won, and then he pulls us out in such a way that he snatched defeat out of the jaws of victory. And now you got Iraq that is under heavy influence by Iran. Thank you, President Obama. We've got Syria that is run by a tyrant. Perhaps Syria was the only place we should have intervened, and this president still hadn't gone in to help there. Oh no, because the 57 states that make up the Organization of Islamic Conference, they were all for us going into Egypt and going into Libya and taking out two people with whom this administration had agreements. They love the idea of America taking out and helping take out people that were allies of ours. They love that. And some of us in this body were saying, don't do this. We don't know who's going to take over. This could be some radicals that will even empower the radicals more. I mean, you look across Tunisia, and Libya, and Egypt, and Iraq, and Iran, and Syria, Lebanon. You look at these countries and come on over to Afghanistan that this president is losing as we speak, and Pakistan, which has been harming us all they could while still taking our money. Thank you, Secretary of State Clinton and President Obama. You look and you go, oh my gosh, this is the makings. This is the beginnings, a massive beginning of a new Ottoman Empire that President Obama can take great credit for. Yeah, we're in big trouble here in America, but wow, look what he has helped do in the Middle East. A new Ottoman Empire. Thank you, President Barack Hussein Obama. This will be quite a legacy for you. And I'm not one of those who says he's not a Christian. All I know is that's between him and God, but what I do know is he has helped jumpstart a new Ottoman Empire and left our friend and ally Israel so vulnerable in this sea of radicalism that he has helped bring to the surface. And how could any of us who were around in '79 not be reminded of President Carter, who's got to be happy? Thank you. Now I'm not the worst president in the world. He's got to be happy, but at the time he thought we'll just turn our backs on the Shah. Not a nice guy, but he was creating some form of stability. But when he was gone, President Carter called Ayatollah Khomeini a man of peace. What a welcome thing. And he came in and he was the supreme leader when our embassy was attacked, which is an act of war, just as it was in Libya, just like it is in Cairo. It's an act of war. And any commander would make it clear, except President Carter and President Obama. You've attacked American soil. You've attacked us under everybody's form of international law. You either straighten it out or we're coming in, because we have a right under international law to protect ourselves. And if it means taking your government out because of what you've done or allowed to be done or help foment, then we do it. And in Egypt, this administration helped bring about what they thought would be a great thing, an Arab Spring. And it's turned into an American winter. At the same time, this administration was blessing and loving the Occupy Wall Street movement, even though they were clearly a bunch of Democrats, a bunch of kids with iPads, iPhones out there, rape, drugs, all kinds of illegality and immorality out there abounding. And this administration is saying this is a good thing. And you see the signs all over the place. Let me see. On the Occupy movement, you'd see these signs like this, ACAB, all cops are, some people said bad, but I've been corrected. It has to do, the B stands for something to do with fatherless children. ACAB, that's the Occupy Oakland, but you can look at pictures, you see all these Occupy movements, ACAB everywhere. Well, I was a little shocked. One of my staff points out, look at that. This is on the wall in Egypt, and I need somebody to explain how among all of this Arabic writing by the radicals that have charged our embassy in Egypt, how in the middle of all this Arabic do we get ACAB? Who's doing that? I mean, there were rumors of some type of collusion, but who among those radicals in Egypt is writing ACAB, which is what you see at all the Occupy movements in America? Somebody's got some explaining to do, I would think, but not to this administration, because this administration thinks both the Occupy movement and the Arab Spring are a great thing, even though it's brought to power radicals who want to destroy America, who want to destroy Israel. How frustrating for our friend Israel. And when we have friends come in here in the last hour who were talking about Fannie and Freddie, on a personal basis, I like Barney Frank. He is a brilliant guy. But it's not that hard to go back and find quotes from him about what the wonderful condition Fannie and Freddie were in. And it's not hard to find people here on Capitol Hill that can explain how he stood in the way of the reforms that some here on Capitol Hill wanted to do. We also heard from him that in 22 there were a bunch elected who don't understand Congress in a free society. Well, they were called extremists. These freshmen that came in saying, you know what? Everybody should pay their fair share. It shouldn't be 51% of Americans paying for everybody else just because Democrats want to keep people beholden to them so they'll keep voting for them. Because once we get one more than half of all the voters who are getting more than they're putting in, we've lost the country. It will be in complete demise. It may be 10 years or so, but once we get to that point, historically, you do not get that country back. And we would not either, absent a miracle of God. We were told during the conventions, the Republicans do not have a franchise on God. Everybody in the Democratic convention, we love God, we worship God, we love Israel, we like Jerusalem as the capital. We heard all this stuff until there was a vote, and holy cow, we saw plain and clear that everybody in the Democratic convention does not want God mentioned. They don't want to hear about God. They don't want to hear about Jerusalem being the capital of Israel. They don't want it. They side more apparently with Palestinians, all you can figure, than they do those who were possessing and in that land 1,600 years before there was a man ever talked about named Muhammad. King David was there in Hebron, which now we're told, oh, do the Israelis have history in this land? It's where David ruled for 7 years, about 16, 17 centuries before anybody ever heard of Muhammad. So how would they not have a history in that land? When I was talking to the Prime Minister Netanyahu about the history in the land, he mentioned the story of Ben-Gurion, who led the ragtag forces to fight their way back up to Jerusalem after overwhelming forces had driven them out. But the story was, and this was the first I'd heard it when Prime Minister mentioned it to me, but I've heard it a number of times since. And he said Ben-Gurion was challenged. What is your voucher for claiming this land? And Prime Minister Netanyahu used the word Bible. I'm sure it was a Torah, but Ben-Gurion held up, he said, a Bible and yelled, "This is my voucher." Do they have a history in the land? How blind do you have to be to not see it? Cap and trade legislation. Thankfully, we had just a handful of enough friends on the Democratic side of the aisle that we were able to stop that. Or it would have tripled, quadrupled the price of gasoline. It would have devastated industry. Industry would have had to leave in even bigger numbers from this country. We were told about the Bush stimulus, that they got bipartisan votes on the Bush stimulus. Well, I guess so. Anytime either party talks about giving away other people's money, we're going to get a bunch of Democrats to go along with the Republicans that mistakenly agree to that. I'm the one that asked President Bush, stand right here in this aisle as he came by. We'd found out that $40 billion of the $160 billion Bush stimulus was going to go to people as rebates, even though they didn't pay income tax. That's when I asked the question, standing right up there, Mr. President, how do you give a rebate to somebody that didn't put any bait in? It's not a rebate. It's welfare. Call it what it is. My friends across the aisle in the last hour said they couldn't even get 100 votes to support President Bush's effort to save the economy. He's talking about TARP. Oh, I would have supported President Bush's efforts to save the economy, but unfortunately, that really good man, smarter than most people around here give him credit for, witty, clever, just a joy to be around. But the problem there was he listened to Hank Paulson and his cronies who were going to bail out their buddies who give 4-to-1 to Democrats over Republicans. That's what happened. So, Paulson did get his way, but we didn't have 100 people on the Republican side of the aisle vote for that, because there was an FDIC former chair named Isaacs. He and a bunch of economists had some recommendations. These are free market recommendations. The projection was even then that we have at least $700 billion in banks overseas that American companies and American individuals earned overseas, and they know if they bring it into the U.S., they'll have to pay 40–50% tax with all the interest and penalties, so they just leave it in banks overseas. They'd love it to bring it in here. But we're the only country that double taxes because we don't let people bring in money without hammering the heck out of them, even though they've done a favor, done a good thing, and earned money overseas that they'd like to bring here into America. And the proposal was all you have to do is say, look, instead of borrowing 42 cents out of every dollar and coming up with $700 billion to give away to Hank Paulson so he can enrich his friends, and under that bill, I read it. It was a disaster. I couldn't vote for that because I read it. Let him give money away to anybody he wants to, loan money to whoever he wants to, pay more than fair market value. If in his mind somehow, some way, someday it might help some possible way of helping our economy do whatever we want to. We don't do that in America, and that bill did it, and that's why you didn't have 100 votes on this Republican side of the aisle for it. And our leadership made a mistake in supporting it on that Friday. Just call them like I see them. That was a mistake. But that's where we are. We heard in the last hour about Republicans who say, my way or the highway. Are you kidding me? We reached across the aisle during Obamacare and say, look, there's a bunch of these things we can agree on. Insurance for people in your household under 26. We could do it for, insurance across state lines. There are a number of things we could agree on. Insurance companies shouldn't be able to punish people for having a pre-existing condition, when the insured has acted in good faith all along the way and the insured messes them around. We were willing to work things out. They said, we've got the votes. We don't need your votes. We don't want them. Well, the truth is, we want Democratic votes on the Republican side, but we don't want to keep taking other people's money to give it away. I've heard in here so many times, well, Jesus talked about helping other people, the orphans and widows. Well, a lot of us belong to churches and we believe in doing that, that is what Jesus said to do. But I can't find anywhere in the Bible that it says, go ye therefore take somebody else's money, because you don't want to do your own. Take somebody else's money and help the widows and orphans and other people. He said, you do it. You help them. And when you do that, I can personally tell you, when you do that, you're individually blessed. And that's why Jesus said it. He knew it would bless the giver more even than the one who receives the gift. And in fact, you want a real example, what did Zacchaeus do after he met Jesus? He went and cut taxes. You don't even have to give in to the fact that he was going to give a 4-to-1 rebate, did, to people that he had wronged. You don't hear that around here. And then to continue to hear our friends talk about ending Medicare as we know it, that disastrous Obamacare bill will end Medicare forever. When you cut $716 billion, when you create this Obamacare monstrosity, it's a government takeover of so many things, and it's disastrous. So yeah, we're having to leave here, and I'm not happy about it. I didn't want another CR passed. We should have demanded that this Democratic majority at the other end of the hall stick around until they got a budget as the law requires them to do, and don't leave until you do it, and let's stay here and get it. And I can promise my friends across the aisle that all we have to hear is any inclination that the Democrats, controlled by Harry Reid in the Senate, as dictated by President Obama down Pennsylvania Avenue, if they want to work a budget together and we can work these things out together, we will come back in a heartbeat. We'll be ready to go. But we saw with that super committee, just as I predicted in July of last year, they didn't want an agreement. And apparently my friends who were talking in the last hour didn't know, but Pat Toomey and some others made a proposal that would have caused more taxes to have to be paid by the wealthiest in the nation that are already, the top 1% paying 39% of the taxes. Well, if they get 39% of the income, they should. But they only get 13% of the income. But they want them to pay more. And here was a proposal in good faith by Republicans, we'll raise revenue, and it was reported here locally that, gee, some of the Democrats said, you know, this may do the trick. We may get to an agreement now. This is great. Thanks for you know, doing this. Since you're willing to raise revenue on the rich, we can reach an agreement. And then they go away, and they must have talked to Harry Reid and President Obama, and all you can see the game plan. You got to go back and tell them we're not going to reach an agreement, because our best hope for winning the presidency again and having control in the Senate is if we tell America the Republicans won't reach an agreement, they're a do-nothing group, and I hope and pray people will look beyond that and see who really is the do-nothing. We got jobs bills down the hall. Man, this ought to be a day of renaissance. This ought to be a day when the economy is booming. We now know we could be exporters of energy. We could be energy independent and export energy. But this president has a war against all of the below, that means all the energy below the ground that we could be using and exporting. He got a war against it. And all he is in favor, as he said, he's for all of the above. That means wind and solar. Well, guess what? The sun doesn't always shine. The wind doesn't always blow. So if that's what you want for energy, it means you're going to have a coal plant, a natural gas plant, something, a hydroelectric plant, and then you're going to have 2 or 3 times as many transmission lines, because when you mandate wind and solar and they don't provide energy all the time, they can't, then you're going to have a source from somewhere. So now we're doubling and tripling and going to force the price of energy to continue to go up, because we're going to demand cylinders and that kind of thing so this administration can reward their cronies. Well, we're at trouble within and without, and I just want to remind my friends that this was reported in the New York Times, December 9, 2008. 5 charged in 9/11 attacks seek to plead guilty. And I'm quoting, at the start of what had been listed as routine proceedings Monday, Judge Henley said he had received a written statement from the 5 men dated November 4th saying they plan to stop filing legal motions and to announce our confession to plead in full. They were pleading guilty. We got the transcript. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed admitted guilt. He admitted he confessed to all kinds of other heinous crimes. And then this administration, President Obama and Eric Holder, announced they want a New York City show trial that would have endangered New York yet again, as if they hadn't had enough trauma, and would have put a trial in there. So immediately these guys withdraw their plea. We're not going to plead guilty. We can get a show trial in New York, because these guys that are running things here don't know what they're doing. What a disaster that would have been. And as far as the great contribution, the great work that's been done in Afghanistan, he took a war where we were making progress, and here's the actual DOD numbers. And you see that under Commander-in-Chief Bush, there were 625 American, our precious, priceless men and women who were killed from October of 01 to the end of 08. 625 precious lives. Bush goes out, President Obama comes in January of 09, and by the end of August, there had been a subtotal of 1,474 additional American men and women killed under Commander Obama. Not only that, 14,817 people had been wounded. Americans had been wounded, lose arms, lose leg, disastrous disabilities under Commander Obama as compared to the 2,638 terrible wounds that were inflicted on Americans under Commander Bush. Our President has been in command of 70% of the deaths in Afghanistan, though he's been commanding half the time, 84% of the wounds. And parents, one of the SEAL Team 6 that was killed on the Chinook, August 6th of 2011, that they were in the briefing. They've said this publicly as well. We'll say it again. One of the parents asked if this was so terrible, that this was such a hotbed. You knew it was a hotbed. A lot American aircraft have been fired on recently. Why would you allow this Chinook to go in? Why wouldn't you send in a drone? And the answer from the general who was doing the briefing, they said, was because we're trying to win the hearts and minds in Afghanistan. You're letting our SEAL team be killed when you are trying to win the hearts and minds. That's not the job of the military. The military's job is to go in, defeat an enemy, and come out. And we got to get back to that. This president has presided over 70% of the deaths in Afghanistan. Disastrous job. It's time to bring the president home as well as bringing our military home. We could just say what President Bush did in October of 01. We're going to provide embedded troops. We're going to let the enemy of our enemy be our friend. Not to this administration. They're the enemy. The enemy of our enemy is our enemy to Obama. But I've met with them a couple of times this year. They're our friends. They're Muslim. They're our friends. They don't want to live under tyrannical rule of the Taliban. And they're willing to fight as they have and die with Americans for that freedom. And so we don't let a renegade group like the Taliban who wants to destroy America be out. And make no mistake, the blind sheik was the object of release by a candidate named Morsi in Egypt. He said, I want the blind sheik released. When I'm elected president, I'm going to demand it. I'm going to get it. Just a day before 9/11 this year, last week, you had the brother of the al-Qaeda leader, Zawahiri, who was saying he was ready to broker a deal that would prevent lots of violence. He also knew the day before that there was an obscure video nobody had ever seen. It wasn't going to inflame anybody, but he knew that his buddies, the Muslim Brotherhood, the Egyptian government, the Egyptian television stations would convert that, translate that into a language that would inflame people, that they could get to do violence in the Middle East, and they did. And, gee, the second day of that broadcasting, here he is, Zawahiri, saying, hey, I can broker a deal, just release the blind sheik, some other murdering thugs, and we'll work a deal out. This administration has offered to release other murdering thugs of the Taliban and to buy them an office in Qatar if they'll just sit down and talk. It's not the way you do foreign diplomacy. You reward our friends so others want to be our friends, and you punish our enemies so they don't want to be our enemies. This president has it backwards. He said they'll have a new look. They'll look at me different because I'm the first president to have ever grown up in a Muslim country, the years he spent in Indonesia. Well, you know, wonder if that might be true. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll want to be friends. Well, the proof is in. The approval rating of the United States in those Muslim countries where we've been was 33%, which was terrible under President Bush in 2008. And now under this president, we see a report last week, it's now 15% under this guy who was going to be our president, and the Muslim countries would love us. They don't. Because in Muslim countries, the real people, the people that we really need to reach out to, not the leaders that hate us and want to destroy it, but the real people, they respect a country who understands who's their enemy and who's their friend. They have no respect for a country that tries to do, it would be the equivalent of a child, and I've been there on the schoolyard, picked on by bullies. I was little growing up, but I can tell you, I had my nose bloodied many a time. You don't win respect nor love from a bully by giving him your lunch money or begging him to be nice to you. Not only do they not love you, not respect you, they gain even more contempt for you. And that's what we're seeing happen. This president's trying to buy affection from people who are bullies, who are radical Islamists that want to destroy us. You're not going to get love and affection. You get contempt. And it helps them get other people to join in the fight against us. This president is doing great damage to us, and it's time to bring it in his presidency to a peaceful, law-abiding end with the election. Things look tragic around the world unless we have a new commander-in-chief and a new leader who wants to rein in the spending. And one thing I'll promise my colleagues across the aisle, if you want to go back to that runaway spending that was too much in 2008 that Speaker Pelosi presided over and Harry Reid had in the Senate, and that ended in the last day of September, you want to go right back to that total amount being spent, I'm with you. I'll vote. I'll do it bipartisan, and I'll bring a bunch of people with us, and we'll bring down $1 trillion a year in spending. How about that? That's pretty bipartisan, isn't it? Go back to a Democratic budget of 2008? Well, I offer that. Let's see how many Democrats are bipartisan enough to take us up on it. I yield back.
The gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Franks, recognized for the balance of the time. 30 minutes.